Hey, welcome back to Masters and Mixes Music Reviews. My name is Drew. I appreciate you coming out. Today we're looking at maybe the most anticipated LP of the year 2021, Scaled and Icy from 21 Pilots. The genre-bending duo of Tyler Joseph and Josh Dunn are back with their first album since Trench in 2018. They had released a single at Christmas that was standalone, and they'd also released at this time last year the single Level of Concern, which was focused on the pandemic and didn't end up making it up onto the album or onto the final track listing here just because of subject matter. Other than Level of Concern, we didn't really have any idea what this album could sound like. The duo is known for somewhat changing their style and going with different genres or different approaches to each album, which Level of Concern had very much of this alternative rock feel, or at least the most alternative rock this band has felt. And nobody really knew if that's what the new album would look like or if it would be a return to the bedroom pop era from their 2009 self-titled debut. Was it going to be more of an electronic, almost progressive feel like Vessel in 2013? Or could it be a much darker concept album like Trench from 2018, which I wasn't the biggest fan of, but many people did appreciate. And what Trench did offer was many musical styles, such as hip-hop influences, R&B, as well as reggae. And while the hip-hop or R&B or reggae influences were profoundly felt on some of the tracks, other tracks like the opener Jumpsuit were as heavy rock as we will ever see 21 Pilots, as far as I can tell, with these much bigger, nearly air raid guitars that are just drowning the track. But all that is to say that we didn't know what this album could sound like. Me, personally, I wanted somewhat of a return to the 2015 masterpiece Blurry Face, which is by no means one style, much in the same way as Trench. It's a mixture of many musical genres, but far and away is their most decisive and coherent work as well. But aside from a few tracks having pretty obvious influences from previous records, Scaled and Icy wasn't really anything like what 21 Pilots had put out before. It really stands alone in their discography as perhaps the most mainstream or most accessible work they've created yet. Scaled and Icy is really a breath of fresh air that was much needed after the year of 2020, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But Scaled and Icy is this perfectly upbeat electronic pop album that is just released in perfect timing for the summer. Scaled and Icy begins with Good Day, which is more or less a mental exercise of what lead singer Tyler Joseph would do or how he would respond if he lost everyone or everything close to him, family, friends, the band, or music as a whole. And it's piano driven. It's really sonically not unlike what you might hear from an Elton John B-side. Good Day does open relatively inconspicuously with just simple keys, but as the track progresses, you'll see more and more instruments and more sounds begin to fill up the soundscape. Good Day is the opener, and as far as what an opener is supposed to do, I think it does fulfill its job in that the themes reflected in Good Day are reflective of the entire album as a whole, and what that is Good Day is 21 Pilots at their happiest, at their most upbeat, and the album, generally speaking, reflects that. Good Day is followed by Choker, which was one of the big singles heading into this album's release, and I have to say this is one of my favorite tracks from 21 Pilots ever. It's both encapsulating the newer sounds, a newer feel for 21 Pilots, while also paying homage to some of their older musical themes and styles that we've come to know the band for. Choker begins with a very infectious drum fill by Josh Dunn before giving way to these much larger waves of bass and synth that are somewhat reminiscent of the deeper cuts from Trench. On a thematic level, we see some pretty boilerplate 21 Pilots topics in that mental illness or anxieties or fears are discussed. These fears that cause Joseph to feel he is choking, he's blowing his opportunities or how to better serve his friends and family, and he's not filling that role. But we also see a new leaf being turned over for 21 Pilots, in that the song somewhat comes to a form of redemption. That redemption is found in his lyrical likening to these anxieties and his response to them, as the idea of sun and shadow and how the light and dark changes throughout the day and he becomes stronger. The slower rap verse at the end of this track is really just the icing on the cake and cements the track as one of my favorite 21 Pilots songs. Track 3 is the lead single, Shy Away, which is certainly one of the catchier songs on the album, with these really vibrant synths following probably some of Josh Dunn's better work as far as the drums go. You know, considering the track listing and considering what could have or should have been a single, I think this was far and away the best choice. You can certainly feel a Killer's influence, but as a whole, I do wish that this track had a stronger climax. It feels like the song builds and builds up to what could be an amazing bridge or epic guitar solo, but that never arrives. It's still getting deserved radio play. It's still one of the better tracks on the album. I just felt that with more development, it could have been far and away one of 21 Pilots' better tracks. Saturday is maybe not the sound anyone expected from 21 Pilots at any point in their career, and that's okay. Saturday is a dynamic collaboration between 21 Pilots and star producer Greg Kurstin, Grammy-winning producer Greg Kurstin, who's worked with the likes of Kendrick Lamar, Kelly Clarkson, Adele, just off the top of my head. So seeing that collaboration and that relationship come out does somewhat come at the price of perhaps what some people would consider a 21 Pilots feel. What a lot of people are saying is that this track sounds like Maroon 5 or sounds like Coldplay. It is certainly an earworm. It's a radio-friendly dance bop about the pandemic changing how you perceive time and still wanting to go out and enjoy, the Saturday on the town. But beyond speaking about how easy it is to get lost in the daily monotony of living in isolation in 2020, it's also a rather touching homage to Joseph's wife, Jenna. There is a lot of anger over this track, a lot of hate, generally undeserved in my opinion, generally self-inflicted by some of the most loyal fans of the group, and the hatred usually goes something like this. Have you heard Saturday? It's 21 Pilots' newest single, but it doesn't sound like 21 Pilots at all. It sounds like Maroon 5 or like Coldplay. It's terrible. It's easy, accessible pop, and it sounds nothing like the band I used to know. Please. 21 Pilots is not selling out. It is certainly an easy comparison to say it sounds like Maroon 5 or it sounds like Coldplay. I am way less concerned with who it sounds like as much as how it actually sounds. And Saturday is well done. It's maybe not my favorite 21 Pilots track. It does seem to lack some ingredient that really brings some vibrance to the track, but as a whole, it's pretty solid. Never Take It follows Saturday, which is singing about the evils and dangers of the mainstream media or the news, which from a message standpoint doesn't seem to land particularly well. I don't feel like it really fits with the general vibe of the album. Even beyond the message, I'm not the biggest fan of some of the backing vocals, especially on the chorus, but the guitar work is actually pretty well done here. You could see some Brand New Eyes era Paramore influence, or some Killers influence as well. Overall, if this is the bottom of the barrel for the album, I will take it. Just the message doesn't really seem to hit home. The use of piano as the central instrument is not limited to Just a Good Day. It's actually returned on Mulberry Street, which is certainly one of the quirkier, jaunty sounds. It's happy, but it's still laid back. Joseph is singing about prescription medication and choosing natural emotional response over that medication, I'm not really sure where he was going with the message of the song. Message aside, though, the sonics are quite nice, and it does a good job of being a understated track that really fits into a strong side B of the LP. It honestly wouldn't be that out of place in a musical. Track 8, Formidable, is Joseph penning a letter to bandmate Josh Dunn, and it's really quite heartfelt. Joseph is singing about looking back through all the years that he and Josh Dunn have toured and created music together, and the sound actually reflects the theme of the song quite well, with Joseph's vocals and Dunn's drumming really taking the front seat throughout most of the verses while everything else is muted down. At first listen, the guitar on this track is not particularly memorable, but after 2 or 3, it really, you begin to understand how it ties the whole track together. Bounce Man is maybe the catchiest song that 21 Pilots has ever put out, which is saying something knowing that their discography has Stressed Out, Heathens, Ride, Fake You Out, Level of Concern, etc., etc. The band certainly has a penchant for creating these earworms and beautiful hooks, but Bounce Man is head and shoulders above the rest. Dunn's percussion is limited to essentially some synthetic boom-boom claps and finger snapping here and there, but as a whole the track is really built around the philosophy of less is more, doing a lot more with a lot less sonically. Bounce Man is easily my favorite track 21 Pilots has put out since Blurry Face, and you can imagine everyone singing along to this one whenever it comes on. Make no mistake, a lot of these tracks are happy and upbeat, and I do think the album is certainly reflective of that as a theme, but that's not the case with No Chances, which is one of the darker cuts, very reminiscent of tracks from Blurry Face like Fairly Local. The bass and synths hit very hard and provide an excellent backdrop to these male voices singing No Chances over and over, which provide just a ominous and dark and cutting feel to the track. Joseph's rap verse here is middling at best, but the instrumentation does generally make up for it. It's probably the weakest track on the album. The closer, Redecorate, is, from a production standpoint, one of the most noteworthy tracks in 21 Pilots' significant discography. The instrumentation and layering, at the very least in the intro, is reminiscent of some Teen Dream era beach house before giving way to almost more of a trappy feel, a la Levitate from Trench. Thematically, Redecorate is a spiritual successor or the epilogue to the story that Good Day starts us with. Where Good Day ponders how you might feel if you lost a loved one, Redecorate is the much more tangible process of how to actually respond to that. Do you redecorate the room of someone who's passed away, or do you simply let it sit as it was as a testament to the person that once was? It's certainly emotional food for thought, and it is an excellent closer, if not somewhat abnormal when looking at other closers in their discography. It certainly stands out as far as the emotional content. As a whole, Scaled and Icy is one of 21 Pilots' best works. It's undoubtedly one of their most cohesive and consistent from track to track. There's not really these different highs and lows as much as it's a steady bar all the way through. Now, that isn't to say that the lack of glaring discrepancies between tracks makes for all excellent tracks. There are some tracks on here, No Chances, that certainly could have been left on the cutting room floor that don't really stand out compared to other tracks like Choker or Bounce Man. And as much as I've mentioned a message of a song not hitting or not really making sense to me, the band is well known for their ability to create songs with multiple meanings. They're intentionally vague about whether something is, a nod to their infamous lore, or perhaps it's just simply a song with a much simpler message to it. But Either way, that leaves the task of figuring out the meaning in the hands, or should I say the ears, of the listener. It's certainly unique and unlike any other album they have in their discography, and I think it is a fresh sound that makes for, in my opinion, a lot of replay value. If you came away from Scaled and Icy disappointed because it sounded too mainstream or too poppy, I would tell you to go back and listen to some of the tracks off of Vessel and how clearly mainstream, accessible pop they were. If you were upset because it wasn't emotionally dark enough, first I'd tell you to go back and listen to Redecorate, but then I'd ask you to tell you to slam on the brakes and let the music happen. To me, it seems like Tyler Joseph is at the best point in his life. The music he's creating seems to reflect that, and to say that the music is not good because it's too happy or too upbeat feels like you're kind of forcing a lot on him when we should just let him exist. In my mind, it's actually really good and refreshing to hear 21 Pilots, but especially Tyler Joseph, making the happiest or most upbeat music we've heard from him. It's a breath of fresh air to see 21 Pilots branching out and maybe not being so easily put in the box as emo or always talking about mental illness. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't write songs about mental illness. In no way am I saying that. I'm more saying perhaps it's good to see this resolution and this growth out of that Tyler Joseph has so clearly felt and lived. It's great to see him address these issues with real and legitimate responses and resolution to these problems. Again, I'm far from saying that they should never talk about mental illness or that their old music was bad because it always talked about it in a negative way. I'm simply saying that it's a refreshing change. It's a refreshing change of outlook that 21 Pilots seems to reflect in their music here. And ultimately, I'm very, very glad to see that change happening and to see this album come out. As a whole, I have to give this album a 9 out of 10. There's really not any major flaws with it, aside from a few tracks not seeming to really quite be fine-tuned as to fit the album. It's still one of their best works. It's still very cohesive and far and away beats Vessel. It far and away beats the self-titled and, in my opinion, beats Trench. 9 out of 10, not bad. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. I really appreciate any and all interaction with my channel. If you feel so inclined, drop a like, a comment, or even a subscription. If you want to stay up to date, you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I've got links here in the bio. Thanks.
I'm coming for you, Fantano.